Hey guys, what's up? So this is kind of, I understand from like regular draft videos and stuff, it's kind of customary to talk about your team building for your round one opponent, which I've never really done any of this kind of stuff before. This is my first draft, this is my first quote-unquote locker room video, and this is going to be my first match in a draft format. So a lot of firsts here today, very interesting. But my round one opponent is going to be the LA Landos, and then I've actually taken off of the spreadsheet what they have because I don't feel like grabbing, you know, necessarily the sprites for every single person versus what I have here on mine is what I have in general. So the one thing I am noticing, well, I guess what this video is going to kind of be is it's going to be a me kind of eliminating mons that I'm not going to bring to this game, and then kind of, you know, refining my lineup, and then I'll upload this after I have the match, and then I'll upload the match probably shortly after as well. And then you can kind of compare to see if the thought process kind of went along with you know, the actual team building that I ended up bringing for the game. So in no way is necessarily anything I bring here going to be finalized, but it's going to give you a good idea in terms of what I'm thinking to bring for this game. So I think first things in mind, we have to note that my opponent did choose a lower tier Mega. This is, you know, kind of an interesting matchup versus a lot of my mons here. I don't really have any super hard ice resist. I think the only thing I have is kind of Starmie, but the thing with Starmie is it is weak to Glalie Crunch, so I do have to be careful with that. Ferrothorn is neutral to it. It can take a hit respectably well. I think the only way I could necessarily get myself a solid ice resist is to make Silvally a different type, which I do like Silvally in draft a lot. It's I want to say like maybe 15 to 20% of the reason that I named the team after it. The other 80% being because it's my favorite mon out of Gen 7. So I was like, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's go for it. So that's what's in the back of my mind. If he's going to bring Mega Glalie, which it matches up really well against a lot of my OU stuff, and none of my OU stuff resists it. Two are actually, one is quad weak to it, and the other one is just regular weak to it in the form of Zygarde and Zapdos. And I don't have any really hard resist, so I think he is going to bring it. Tapu Lele is also a really tempting choice here. I do have a bit of a fairy weakness in that my Mega and my OU are both weak to it. My Gengar does not like dealing with it. So if Tapu Lele were to show up, I do think it would be Scarf over Specs. This is something to keep in mind because I do like Gengar here, especially for that. I do have type advantage if I come in on it as a Scarf Gengar. I won't really necessarily know if it's a Scarf Lele until, you know, it fires off a hit on something. I think a special defensive Ferrothorn would be pretty good here to kind of deal with that. So in terms of what I have, let's see. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to figure out like things to drop first to kind of make the layout cleaner. So looking at my top couple of you know, shit going on here, I don't like Mega Glalie or Lele or Togekiss, or to an extent, you know, an HP Ice Tornadus Therian against Zygarde. Unfortunately, I don't think Zygarde is really going to get a lot of mileage in this match, just for those above reasons. It doesn't have anything super effective to break Porygon 2. It doesn't have anything super effective to break Scizor. The only things it really helps me against are Lycanroc Midnight, Garbodor. I would assume, I think Haxorus might actually be a little bit faster if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, outside of that, like it can take a hit from Scizor. But it's really just a poor matchup for Zygarde. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to leave Zygarde on the bench for this one. For other stuff I got going on, I'm kind of looking at Smeargle right now and kind of looking like, you know, what could be very useful about Smeargle on this matchup. So first off, you know, getting webs up would be pretty awesome in that it would hurt the Lele a lot if it was a Scarf Lele. Scarf Keldeo is also a very tempting option there as well. I don't have to worry about Mega Glalie outpacing anything in the base 100 area. I'm kind of looking at Mega Medicham because I think Mega Medicham is 100? Don't quote me on this right off the bat. I don't play that often, but I think that is the play. Let's see. Medicham. Medicham is base 100, and I think Glalie is also 100. Yeah, so they're both 100. Sorry, they're extremely unprofessional, but I had to go check it just to make sure I'm not spouting random shit out of my mouth. So that would eliminate that possibility for Spito, which means that the best thing it could do is Ice Shard from there, and I'm pretty sure Mega Medicham can take one Ice Shard. So the one thing I am noticing for sure is between Porygon 2, potentially, let's see. So I think I do outpace a normal Haxorus and I can probably one-shot it with an Ice Punch. I'm not 100% on that, but, you know, Haxorus is not a very defensive mon whatsoever, and Mega Medicham is just that much of a freaking powerhouse. I have no doubt in my mind that it wouldn't die to a high jump kick. I definitely need it for Porygon 2. I'm a little scared of taking a Choice Banded Bullet Punch from Scizor, but if Scizor comes in on a Mega Medicham, it's going to take huge damage. There's not a lot of hits that Scizor can necessarily switch on. Like, even a Zen Headbutt is still going to do a really respectable chunk of damage. Garbodor is probably not going to be showing up to this matchup with that in mind. I mean, it could... potentially, knowing now that, oh shit, that's my phone, sorry. Now knowing that Zygarde is more than likely not going to end up showing up to this game. I still don't think that is a strong possibility. I don't think Miltank's showing up either. I think the Mega Medicham just really busts through everything defensive on this team. You're looking at Garbodor, Zen Headbutt. You're looking at Miltank or Porygon 2, High Jump Kick. I think Scizor is probably where it's going to be at, and Togekiss, I think, are going to be his two defensive mons of choice if he really wants to go for Togekiss being defensive. Oh my god, we gotta... Go away. I don't want to hear you. Stop. Okay, so with that in mind, we have effectively just kind of... You know, we've said Mega Medicham is going to be first on this roster, which is totally fine. I'm totally down with that. It offers a lot of solutions for defensive stuff, and it kind of opens the way for everything else. So, let's move Zapdos, and let's move Kamala. Actually, let's move you guys in here. You guys will be in the inner circle. So, I like Mega Medicham, and I do like... Who else was I talking about? I don't like Zygarde. That's what I said. Okay, so going on from here, liking stuff to deal with Scizor. The one thing I do got to worry about here is Keldeo. Keldeo can be a little bit of a problem for a decent amount of my mons. I do like Ferrothorn regardless, and the reason for this is a special defensive Ferrothorn can still take hits from Keldeo, even if it's a Spec Secret Sword, it's going to hurt like a bitch, but I'm pretty sure I can still take it. Starmie's also in the back of my mind for this exact reason. It does resist the Mega Glalie any moves, pretty much, except for if it runs randomly Freeze Dry. I do resist both of Keldeo's stabs. I do resist Scizor in general. In terms of switching in on a Bullet Punch, I wouldn't necessarily like a U-turn, and Knockoff is also a thing that I do have to worry about as well. But if I'm in a scenario where I think a Bullet Punch is coming, I can switch in Starmie and I can be good to go. Plus, I can run Scald on this thing, and I can basically threaten out, I can threaten Glalie, I can threaten Scizor, and I can to an extent threaten Haxorus as well. So, we'll sit on that for a bit. I'm feeling Starmie right now, so let's go ahead and put that on there. Now, at this point, I do have a little bit of a Ghost weakness is one thing I am noticing. Thankfully, Silvally is here to pick out pretty much anything I want to, but the only types that I could necessarily make Silvally that would really benefit me here in terms of resisting Ghost are going to be keep it as normal, in which case Komala and Smeargle are also options, or I could go for Dark is another option as well, but with Togekiss and Tapu Lele, I really might want to reconsider and maybe just not add any more Ghost weaknesses. I know it doesn't have a Ghost type, but you can still run the Ghost coverage. Specifically on what? Porygon 2 could get, I think Porygon 2 gets Shadow Ball? I think there, and then Lele also does get access to Shadow Ball, are probably the main two Ghost moves I'm going to have to worry about. And then, you know, Starmie being weak to Dark as well. Mega Medicham takes it neutrally, which is whatever. Actually, that's a little bit relevant because I can't get knocked off. So I could switch in onto an unboosted knockoff from Scizor. Probably die to a Bullet Punch, but if it is like a banded knockoff or something like that, you know, we'll see how well I take that. I might end up eating those words, but in my head, it sounds not terrible, you know what I mean? So, I got Starmie here, and I got Medicham here. One other thing to keep in mind is, let's see, I do still like Ferrothorn. I do still like Ferrothorn because if it is Scarf Lele, I can Thunder Wave it. If it's, you know, if I live from Keldeo, I can Thunder Wave it. The main things I do have to fear in general are the faster mons, the faster special attacking mons of Tapu Lele, Keldeo, and Tornadus. I can probably get away with living any one hit except for maybe like a Specs or a Life Orb Heat Wave from Tornadus. And I think beyond that, I can get away with a Thunder Wave and go from there. I don't think even a Specs HP Fire from Lele is going to be enough to knock out a Special Defensive Ferrothorn. So at that point, I would potentially Gyro Ball. For Keldeo, I could Power Whip, and then for Tornado, since I lack the Oko, I could Thunder Wave it and then leave it for something else. So I like these three here. These guys are okay with each other. Putting Ferrothorn does grant me a electric switch in for Starmie, and I think it also kind of helps out a little bit with my... I have a little bit of a flying weakness is what I've noticed. So Tornadus and Togekiss are going to be big problems, which is why we're going to go into my... I'm gonna move these guys a little bit this way. These are the guys I'm kind of leaning towards. I'm leaning towards Gengar, Zapdos, and a Silvally type of my choice is what I'm thinking here. So, Smeargle is an option, but I don't necessarily agree with the amount of flying types he has on his team. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of use out of Sticky Web. He does not have a grass type, which means I can Spore something. But just, you know, he's got a Defogger in the form of Scizor, he's got a Defogger in the form of Togekiss. That's not necessarily something I would want to try to deal with. And I mean, in terms of Scizor, I need a Fire move to really just bust out of it. And then for Togekiss, I would need a strong Steel move, or I'd need a strong Poison move. It's for this reason I was considering Poison Jab on Mega Medicham pretty much the entire time. But Silvally is going to be a lot of swing room here, so we'll get to that when we get to that. In terms of a flying resist, I'm really liking Zapdos here. And I think an offensive Zapdos would be pretty solid in terms of what I could get going on. I could switch into a Spec Secret Sword from Keldeo. I'm not going to be doing much from Lele, and I do Speed Tie with Mega Glalie, who can just as easily go for an Ice Shard. But I do have Heat Wave for Scizor, which means I can switch in on both of Scizor's stabs. So I'm putting pressure on that Defogger. I put offensive pressure on Togekiss in that I could switch it in on a Thunder Wave, or I can switch Zapdos in on a potential Thunder Wave. I can switch it in on an Air Slash. Pretty much anytime something wants to come into Defog, because I think those are I'm pretty sure those are the only two Defoggers. Zapdos is going to be the immediate response. So while I don't have something that is going to immediately say, hey, you know what, we're going to get a shit ton of momentum, I could put Volt Switch on Zapdos to kind of mitigate that. There are no ground types as far as I know. Let me see. No. If anything, there's actually a little bit of electric weaknesses, which I'm a big fan of. There's about 3 here, so I think Zapdos is a very strong pick with Heat Wave for that. So the other guy I was looking at, I realize this team is a little bit special attack heavy, but we're going to remedy that with Silvally in just a minute. I like Gengar here a lot, because if I want to run a Trick Scarf or a Trick Spec set, I can do so. And what this will do is it'll let me basically outpace Keldeo, outpace any variant of Keldeo, and I could literally run Psychic on this if I want to. I think it would potentially help out if a Lele set up the terrain for me. But that would be a really isolated situation, is what I'm thinking. But Psychic for Keldeo or Thunderbolt for Tornadus and Togekiss and Keldeo. I think Thunderbolt might actually be a better play here, since he doesn't immediately have any... I don't think he has any electric resistances. I think he just has Porygon 2, which can switch into it just fine. The one thing I do have to worry about is Porygon 2 comes in, traces my Curse Body, and I proc my own Curse Body, then all of a sudden I'm going to have to switch out. But given that could happen, it could lead my opponent into wanting to switch in Porygon 2 more often, which means that I would potentially be able to trick it, which I'm a pretty big fan of that as well. I don't necessarily know how that's going to play out, but we'll see it when we see it. So I like Gengar here. It gives me a lot of stuff. I think I can take an Ice Shard from Mega Glalie, and basically just, if I wanted to go for Focus Blast, I could. I think my option with Porygon 2 is more crippling it and whittling it down if I don't have Medicham around. I desperately, I think this is the most key point of this matchup, in that I need to keep Mega Medicham around for Porygon 2. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty rough game. Otherwise, in terms of other offensive pressure, I really do think my 6th here is either going to be... You know, I'm tempted to make that Drag, but I'm also thinking about, you know, the fact that there are 2 Defoggers on this team, and I do have a Defiant Pokemon in the form of Primeape. Now, Primeape isn't really going to offer me a lot unless I potentially Scarf it, since at that point, I do have... Primeape does get Gunk Shot, which is pretty cool. but I do get close combat for a decent amount of mons. He's got a good amount of fighting resist, don't get me wrong, but he's got a good amount of things that are weak to fighting as well. So you got Mega Glalie, you got Porygon 2. I'm mainly looking at Porygon 2. And then in terms of stuff that, and I'm realizing also that Starmie kind of has a fun time with Togekiss and Tornadus in that I have Natural Cure to not necessarily worry about Thunder Wave from Togekiss. And I do get T-Bolt and Ice Beam, which is pretty cool. Adding Primeape also does give me a U-turner, so if I want momentum into Mega Medicham to literally just kind of bust something up, I could do that. It does, however, add a... I think it adds a fairy weakness, but honestly, that's fine. It adds a flying weakness, which I didn't have any hard resist to flying, and I think that brings me up to 2. So, wouldn't be terrible here. I would want to also consider Silvally for that slot, because Silvally does get access to Parting Shot. I could make it whatever type I needed to fit the scenario. And that's why, again, I really like Silvally, because here I'm looking at Primeape, and I'm thinking, you know what? It's beneficial because I can switch it in on a defog. It's a little bit scarier with Togekiss, but I mean with Silvally, I'm looking at those base 95 stats all around. I'm like, you know what? That's some potential for some momentum there. I'm actually leaning towards either Fire or Rock for Silvally. The scary thing about going with Rock for that reason is... You got Scizor. You got Scizor, you got Keldeo in the back. It doesn't really necessarily matter against Lele unless it really wants to go for Focus Blast. You also do run the risk of Mega Glalie with Earthquake. My options, the reason I'm considering Rock, Steel, or Electric for this are because of the Tornadus and Togekiss combo that he's got sitting in the back there. So I need solid ways to deal with those. And I'm also on my mind, oh, you know what? Electric actually also deals with Keldeo too. Once again, I do have to worry about Mega Glalie's Earthquake, but I don't know. Electric Silvally, possibly the play here. And then if I really wanted Bolt Beam, I could run Ice Fang for Haxorus is a potential option there too. It just kind of sucks that I don't think Silvally gets any good fighting moves, so I'm just going to have to be pretty careful with it. But I think with Volt Switch on Zapdos and Parting Shot on Silvally, I've got a good amount of pivot into some pretty reliable threats in the form of Gengar and Mega Medicham. I have a Spinner in the form of Starmie. I have a Rock Setter as well as, you know, kind of a utility mon in the form of Ferrothorn. And I haven't decided whether or not I'm just going to run a mixed defense or a straight special defensive set. I think special defensive might be what I'm going with here. He doesn't have any necessarily very prominent physical threats that I'm too scared of outside of Scizor. But I have options for Scizor in the form of Starmie potentially getting a Scald, if I'm able to switch in on it. I could run HP Fire and Gengar if I really wanted to, if I learn that it's actually locked in on something else. Zapdos has to come in on Scizor, but I can go for, at that point I can go for a T-Wave, I can go for a Volt Switch, I can go for whatever. Medicham can probably take one hit, and if I really wanted to, I could just straight up run like a naive Silvally with Flamethrower. To potentially deal with Scizor. So that is also an option too. It's something that's on my mind, having Scizor around for that. So I think it's for this reason that we're going to go with Silvally over Primeape for our 6th mon here. Everybody else is just going to kind of hang out there. It's interesting because I don't know how much of these other mons are going to get use, but with the amount of defoggers on my opponent's team, I'm not necessarily liking what's going on there. The fact that he gets access to 2, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on Mega Medicham in order to get rid of a good amount of the bulk on my opponent's team, and Porygon 2 and then Togekiss with Poison Jab. Mega Medicham just really doesn't have big shoulders in general, so in order to get him to carry the rest of the team, it's going to be a little difficult, and I don't think Silvally is going to be providing what I need here. I think what I need here is pivot, and my opponent has no way to necessarily stop a Parting Shot, or a Volt Switch, since there are no ground types here. So in terms of Silvally, what type would I use? Like I said, Electric is a consideration, since the other Electric type I do have on my team actually isn't weak to Earthquake, and I only have one other mon that is weak to Earthquake. It's weird to say Gengar is weak to Earthquake now, but it is. So Gengar is my other Earthquake weakness, and I would like some Electric offense, as well as a resistance to Hurricane, Air Slash, and, what was that other mon? Oh, Keldeo, I don't get a resistance to Keldeo specifically, but I don't get another weakness to Keldeo, which is nice. So running, you know, that. I can't run its Scarf or anything like that, unfortunately, but, you know, just running a regular speed one and hopefully taking a hit, we can kind of see what happens there. So, I guess that's kind of picking my head apart for this locker room video. I mean, if the game actually ends up going like... I'm going to end up with a team very close to this. So I'm going to screenshot this, look at it myself, give it some deeper thought, and then we'll see what we go into. I think I'm going to have my game at some point in time, probably in the next couple of days. I'm going to try to shoot for tomorrow, actually. That would be a good time to do it and to stream it live. Since I think I have my layout... Where's my... Oh, shit, that's huge. Okay, so let's not do that. Wait, no, I can do that. Because outside of that, it works out okay. So here's the layout. I'll put my opponent's logo right there. And we should be good to go from here. This is what I like about this, and this is what I'm going to run with. I also do have all the Silvally spreads, don't worry. So when I get the electric one, I'll have the electric one in the official layout. Or I could just run the regular one because I'm lazy. And I don't know, whatever. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in round 1 of the PGBL. I think that's what we're called. Sure, yes.